Welcome back to the APAICS Tech Summit. I'm Madeline Milka, President and CEO of APAICS. I'd like to now introduce KPAC First Vice Chair, Congresswoman Grace Meng. Congresswoman Meng proudly represents New York's 10th Congressional District and is the first and only Asian American member of Congress from New York State. In Congress, Congresswoman Meng serves on the House Appropriations Committee, where she is New York's senior member and is the vice ranking member. She also sits on both the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee and the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Subcommittee. Let's give a warm welcome to Congresswoman Grace Meng.
Hi, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng from Queens, New York. Thanks so much for inviting me to speak today, and I hope everyone has a great time at the 2023 APEX Tech Summit. Digital equity in a changing world is something we know to be of critical importance to enhancing economic, educational, and health outcomes in our communities. In our schools, hospitals, homes, and throughout society, the constantly expanding need for connectivity has become crucial for success. This was highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic when children who didn't have regular access to high-speed internet outside of school had difficulty with remote learning. Much of learning today is done online, and many students are disadvantaged when they don't have access to reliable high-speed internet. I was proud to champion legislation that would help close the homework gap by introducing my bill, and this bill became the basis for a much larger program to address the digital divide during COVID-19. I led the charge with Senator Ed Markey to create the FCC's $7.1 billion Emergency Connectivity Fund, a provision President Biden signed into law as part of the 2021 American Rescue Plan, which ensured that students had access to the internet. Thanks to our work, nearly 18 million students have benefited from this program, and our work is not done. We live in an increasingly digital world, and because of this, we must make sure that everyone, regardless of their economic status, has access to the tools that allow them to be full participants in this digital age and our modern economy. I look forward to continuing to help provide every outlet to increase opportunities for digital inclusion for students across our country. Thanks again for inviting me to speak, and I hope you enjoy the summit.
I'd like to now introduce KPAC Executive Board Member, Congressman Ro Khanna. Congressman Khanna represents California's 17th Congressional District, located in the heart of Silicon Valley. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee as ranking member of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Innovative Technologies, and Information Systems. He co-chairs the Congressional Caucus on India and Indian Americans, serves as a member of the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, and on the Oversight and Accountability Committee, where he previously chaired the Environmental Subcommittee. Let's welcome Congressman Khanna.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ro Khanna. I represent Silicon Valley in Congress. I'm so proud of APEX for having this important conversation about digital equity in a changing world. As a representative of Silicon Valley, my district is the only majority Asian American district in the continental United States. Our community, the Asian American community, is integrated with leading technology. We're pioneers when it comes to AI, synthetic biology, alternative proteins, electric vehicles, and clean technology. And so we have a particular responsibility to make sure that this technology is equitable and that there are safeguards around the technology. We need to work to make sure everyone has access to the internet, to high-speed internet, that everyone has access to good-paying technology jobs. And I've been partnering with many Asian Americans in our district and with companies like Google and Zoom to create partnerships at HBCUs, at Hispanic Serving Institutes, at rural community colleges to create technology jobs and pathways for technology participation for communities that traditionally don't have them. We also need to make sure that we have an Internet Bill of Rights, that we're protecting people's privacy, and we need to lead in the conversation on AI, making sure that AI can unleash new possibilities in medicine, in technology itself with coding and in education, and yet that we have checks so that AI is safe. I know that the Asian American community will help lead that conversation. I'm excited about your panel, and I look forward to hearing the insights and discussion.
Our next speaker is Michelle Persaud. Michelle serves as Chief Policy Counsel of Strategic Alliances and External Affairs at T-Mobile. Prior to joining the T-Mobile family in 2007, Michelle served as Senior Counsel for the House Judiciary Committee, where she acted on behalf of the late Chairman John Conyers, Jr., the Dean and original founder of the Congressional Black Caucus, to drive the committee's focus on matters of civil rights, civil liberties, and social justice. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Persaud.
Hi, I'm Michelle Persaud, Chief Policy Counsel for Strategic Alliances and External Affairs here at T-Mobile. We are so pleased to be partnering with the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies on the 2023 Tech Summit. I know we're all very much looking forward to what promises to be an engaging discussion on digital equity in a changing world. Here at T-Mobile, we believe in making a positive impact in the communities in which we serve. And that's just part of the reason that we committed more than $25 million over 5 years through our Equity in Action Plan. This is a plan to invest in community organizations that promote equity and opportunity for some of the most historically under-resourced and underserved areas across the country. Our Equity in Action Plan inspires us to lead by example, to put people first, and to ensure that DE&I remains at the center of everything that we do. Digital equity is at the core of that mission. And we know we can't do this work alone, so we're very proud to partner with APAICS, along with other AAPI organizations, including Asian Americans Advancing Justice, OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates, and APIA Vote, just to name a few. Part of this important work includes our sponsorship of OCA's AAPI Digital Access Survey. This is the first nationwide AAPI Internet Accessibility Survey, which sets out to advocate for digital equity by listening to AAPI communities across the country and to understand their relationship with the digital divide. Specifically, this survey aims to highlight where and how the AAPI community has internet access. More importantly, the data collected through this survey will be used to bridge the digital divide among AAPI communities by informing the work of legislators, policymakers, internet service providers, and other key stakeholders, just to name a few. Additionally, through T-Mobile initiatives like our Hometown Grants Project, Project 10 Million, and our participation in the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP, we're working every single day to bridge the digital divide and to ensure that everyone has access to the tools that they need to succeed. Finally, I just want to thank APAICS for hosting these thoughtful discussions and for convening the community and corporate leaders and subject matter experts, and as well as our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander elected officials for these very important, actually critical, bipartisan policy discussions. Thank you so much, and have a productive and enlightening summit. I know I'm looking forward to it. Take care.
Thank you for your remarks, Michelle. Our second panel for the APAICS Tech Summit is entitled Digital Equity in a Changing World. The need for increased connectivity becomes more crucial as the world rapidly evolves and embraces new technologies. From small businesses to classrooms and healthcare providers, digital literacy and high-speed internet access are now basic requirements for success. This panel will explore the opportunities that come with enhancing connectivity in a changing world where emerging technologies, shifting demographics, and evolving communication patterns require innovative solutions across sectors. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this panel, Tomoko Yokoi. Tomoko is a digital transformation advisor and researcher at IMD Business School at ETH Zurich, Switzerland. She is a Forbes contributor on topics related to responsible digital transformation and innovation, and her insights have been published in numerous outlets such as MIT Sloan Management Review and Harvard Business Review. She's the co-author of Hacking Digital, Best Practices to Implement and Accelerate Your Business Transformation. Let's give a warm welcome to Tomoko and our panelists.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm delighted to welcome you to an exciting panel on the topic of digital equity in a changing world. The need for increased connectivity is crucial as the world rapidly evolves. From small businesses to classrooms and access to health, digital literacy and high-speed internet access are now basic requirements for success. Here with me today to discuss this topic are three distinguished guests representing different viewpoints. We have Beth Fujimoto, Sharon Lota, and Nicole Morgenstern. Welcome, everybody. So first, let's get started with getting to know our panelists today. I'd like each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, the work they do on this topic, and if they could just give us a little understanding of their perspective, that would be really nice as well. Nicole, can you get us started, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Nicole Morgenstern. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. Advancing Justice AAJC is a civil rights and human rights organization that's based out of Washington, D.C. that works to build and promote a fair and equitable society for all. One of our primary goals over the last few years in the tech area is helping to bridge the digital divide in Asian American communities through advocating for greater access to affordable broadband internet and digital literacy training. We've done this through working with civil rights organizations, Congress, and the White House to implement the emergency broadband benefit, which later became the Affordable Connectivity Program. The Affordable Connectivity Program is a really great way in making broadband access more affordable to communities across the US, but we think that there's still more that needs to be done to bridge the digital divide and really make sure that communities, once they have access to broadband, are able to use it and really get online and use it for all of today's things that they can do in society.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Sharon.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an absolute delight to be a part of this panel today. So I'm Sharon Loda. I'm a Group Vice President, Executive Chief Engineer here at Toyota Motor North America. My responsibility is essentially the connected car. Now, in terms of Toyota, we're vested in just increasing our impact and just improving digital literacy as well as making the most of connectivity. And you may ask why, right? So for us, access to digital connectivity and platforms, it's no longer a luxury, it's an absolute necessity. The digital age comes with a lot of opportunities, and equal access is something that we feel we should all strive for. And when you think about opportunities, what are some of those opportunities? They include access to information, education, job opportunities, as well as essential services. But in a nutshell, we need to make sure that we're feeding that pipeline of the talent that we're going to need to build great cars and great experiences. So thanks for having me today. Really looking forward to the panel.
Thank you. And Beth.
Thank you, Tomoko. Excited to be here. Thank you all so much. I'm Beth Fujimoto, AVP Public Policy in AT&T's Global Public Policy Organization in External and Legislative Affairs. I support our company's universal broadband efforts, helping to develop policies that we share with federal, state, and local government policymakers on how government agencies and the private sector can work together to ensure that all Americans have access to broadband services. And why is this important? It's so obvious that it almost seems silly to say out loud, but access to broadband today is really the great enabler of nearly every part of our lives. We read ebooks, we buy groceries and toothbrushes and food for our pets online, we get our news online, we connect our utilities and see doctors online, we figure out how to repair stuff watching YouTube videos, and on and on and on and on and on. But in other words, connectivity has transformed virtually every aspect of our lives. But that being said, some Americans, nonetheless aren't online today, really raising questions relating to the digital divide and digital equity. The issues we're focusing on here today. From AT&T's perspective, the digital divide is actually made up of three distinct but related challenges, which my company is helping to address. Each of these issues. And I'm also pleased to say that all three issues are the focus of increasing partnerships between the public, private, and nonprofit sectors in the very best sense of the word. We'll be talking about each of these more today, but for now, just by way of introduction, I'd say these three challenges are what I call the 3 A's: availability, affordability, and adoption. Availability is about where networks physically do and do not reach. And there's a lot going on in this area, which I'm excited to talk about today. Second challenge for digital equity is affordability, which Nicole mentioned in her opening comments. The affordability divide is a barrier, particularly among people who have low incomes. And again, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. There are some clouds on the horizon, which we should also talk about as well. And finally, the third digital equity challenge is adoption. In other words, why people who have physical access to broadband still aren't online, don't subscribe to broadband services, and don't use broadband-enabled technologies. Again, there's a huge effort going on amongst all stakeholders, and really excited to talk about all these issues with you all today.
Thanks very much for that overview as well. So the panel definitely is about digital equity, or more precisely, the lack of access to digital services. But how big is this problem in the US, and why should we pay attention to it? Nicole, could you give us a little bit of an overview of the problem, how big it is?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. Our perspective is really focused on the Asian American community, but we know that every community is impacted by the digital divide. When we look at digital divide studies, many of them fail to include Asian Americans, and the ones that do are largely conducted in English and online. This leaves out the hardest to reach communities and the ones that are most underserved right now, and misrepresents what the digital divide looks like in Asian American communities. Despite this lack of data, there are other indicators that we can use to better understand what the divide looks like among different ethnic groups. You can look at enrollment in welfare programs that can qualify a person for Lifeline, such as SNAP and Medicare, as one indicator to understand the potential gap in broadband access. In 2021, for example, 9.4% of the overall Asian American community was enrolled in SNAP. But if you look at the different divide between the different ethnic groups, you can see a stark difference. For example, 31.4% of Taiwanese Americans were enrolled compared to 24.5% of Native Hawaiians. During the pandemic lockdown, communities with high rates of unserved and underserved community households were impacted the greatest by this divide. There were parts of rural Hawaii that were largely unable to get online for online schooling when they were forced to stay at home because they didn't have sufficient broadband access to support their online learning. This forced students to go outside of their homes, further putting their families at risk during a public health crisis. In San Jose, California, it's estimated that 100,000 residents lack internet access at home. And during the pandemic, this meant that these families had a really hard time attending work, going to school, and accessing critical healthcare services. While the conversation around the digital divide is largely centered around rural communities, we shouldn't assume that living in an urban environment automatically means that you have access to quality and affordable broadband internet. High-speed and reliable broadband is really necessary to keep immigrant families connected to their in-language communities in the US and abroad. It provides the elderly with more access to healthcare and gives students access to English as a second language homework assistance. We really think that the digital divide is impacting people all across the US, which is why we think that it's so important to participate in panels like this and make sure that people are understanding how it's impacting people's day-to-day lives.
Beth, you also had some comments on size. How big is the problem?
Right. And so again, looking at this from the perspective of the 3 A's we talked about, the FCC has begun publishing new nationwide address level broadband maps. And these maps show that about 12 million locations are either unserved or underserved as of the end of last year. Now, the industry is making steady and significant progress toward closing the availability divide. Just that underserved number was more than 13 million just 6 months earlier in June 2022. On the issue of broadband affordability, very similar to what Nicole said, the White House has estimated that about 48 million American households are eligible for the federal affordable connectivity program that Nicole mentioned, or ACP, which supports discounts on broadband service for consumers who have limited incomes. Families are eligible for the ACP if, among other things, their income is at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, which right now is about $60,000 a year for a family of 4, or if they participate in one or more income-based federal assistance programs like Medicaid. So again, based on those eligibility criteria, the White House has estimated about 48 million American households would qualify. The third issue, adoption, which Nicole mentioned, can be somewhat harder to qualify. There is data indicating that the AA-NHPI community as a whole has a relatively high broadband subscription rate. About 80% of the population has broadband at home, but we know that the community is not a monolith, and poverty correlates with lower broadband adoption. And significantly, pockets of poverty exist among certain subgroups, in particular, the Burmese, Bangladeshi, Hmong, Laotian, Nepalese, and Pakistani subgroups, for example, have higher poverty rates than the US average of 12%. Beyond that, McKinsey has indicated that Asian Americans are overrepresented in low-paying occupations like manicurists, skincare specialists, cooks, sewing machine operators. And so what this all ultimately leads to is that, according to the Census Bureau, nearly 20% of the AA-NHPI community do not have a broadband subscription at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much to both for outlining the size and the extent of the problem. But what exactly are some of the key issues and challenges related to this? I think Nicole and Beth, you've already given some. Sharon, could you add to that some of those things that we've heard?
Yeah, I think as in the automotive space, I can't speak to a lot of the statistics around, the lack of connectivity or digital. But what I can say, I love the 3 A's, by the way, Beth. I'm going to use that. Of course, infrastructure and access are key gaps. And even if the infrastructure exists, the cost to access those digital platforms is not affordable to all. I think one additional thing that compounds the issue is that technology obsolescence is happening at a rapid pace. And I can imagine that affluent areas get the latest upgrades first. And I'm going to age myself, but I remember just going from broadband to fiber had a huge impact on user experience for me. And connectivity aside, access to modern digital platforms is simply not free. If you think about large language models, something like an OpenAI GPT, of course you can get a free usage of that, but you need to get a subscription to get unlimited use. So things are moving really rapidly in this technology space, and the end impact that somebody like myself or my organization would feel is that there's not the talent pipeline. It's not staffed, especially when it comes to Asians, and I'll say women in tech, specifically Asian women in tech. It's really difficult to find candidates for hiring because we haven't solved the problem at the top of the funnel yet. So my hope is that us getting together and some of these partnerships that we simply solve the root cause of the problem. Is we got to get the connectivity to the younger people, and the education and the access of 3 A's. That Beth had mentioned, and then that's going to simply help set us up for a bright future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Beth and Nicole, do you have anything to add regarding a key issue that we have not yet discussed? No?
I have one quick other item to add. I think something else that when we have all these conversations that we need to also keep in mind is the impact that historical redlining has had on communities and ethnic enclaves all across the U.S. We see it in San Francisco, where 40% of housing are single-room occupancies. This really prevents community members from able to get access to broadband in their homes if somebody else in that building already has an account with that address. We also see it in these buildings having really old concrete walls and concrete floors, which prevents the transmission of Wi-Fi going throughout these buildings. Even in communities where they are able to get internet access, the quality and the connection may really vary. For example, in Boston's Chinatown, we hear a lot about how the connection is so unstable that users are kicked off the internet consistently, which really makes it unusable for your day-to-day life. And those are just other considerations I think that we have to keep in mind as we're talking about building out digital equity, is making sure people have the access to the infrastructure that will help them be able to get connected online.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, because I think when we talk about, you would just mention about digital access, infrastructure is the first step. So what exactly is the status of the infrastructure? Beth, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Tomoko. This is a really good news story. The nation's broadband providers have steadily made progress in driving faster broadband services farther and farther out across the country. Broadband services today at speeds of, and forgive me, this is a little bit of a techie thing, but at speeds of 100 megs download and 20 megs upload, or what FCC Chair Rosen Worcel has recently proposed to be the new, kind of universal benchmark speed target, is already available today to more than 92% of homes in the United States. And just to put this in context, the FCC's 2010 National Broadband Plan recommended that the US aim for the then aggressive universal broadband target of getting 4 megs download and 1 meg upload to all Americans. We've clearly blown through that goal, and we're now setting our sights on symmetrical gigabit speeds and beyond. This rapid pace of deployment is really due to the unparalleled investments by America's broadband industry, which have totaled more than $2 trillion since 1996, according to US Telecom. And these investments are continuing. My company, AT&T, for example, is leading the nation's largest fiber build to customer locations, such that we are on track to pass more than 30 million homes and businesses in our wireline footprint by the end of 2025. And we can already serve more than 20 million homes and more than 3 million business locations with fiber to the premises, which Sharon mentioned, has really been a game changer, right? Beyond that, there are some, but there are most definitely some areas that continue to have availability challenges, particularly in rural and other less dense areas. But that said, there's more good news for these areas too, because in the infrastructure bill enacted in 2021, Congress directed more than $42 billion to establish the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD for short, being administered by the National Telecom and Information Administration. This program is a state block grant program that will help states to competitively award deployment grants to get broadband to homes that don't have broadband or don't have it at the benchmark speed I mentioned earlier of 100 megs down, 20 megs up. This program does prioritize funding to fiber to the home deployments, recognizing that end-to-end fiber will deploy infrastructure that is the most future-proof available, with the capacity for virtually unlimited usage and ultra-fast multi-gigabit speeds. So, this can really be a game changer if states spend the money wisely. And so, among other things, it's really important that states select providers with a proven track record of delivering on deployment commitments.
Right. So it sounds like some progress is being made on developing these digital highways, and I think that's good news. But I think the next question we really need to discuss here is that just because the infrastructure is there, it doesn't mean that people will actually use it. And so I think we come to a couple of issues when we talk about adoption. There's the aspect of digital literacy, for example. Sharon, do you have some thoughts on that? You talked a lot about STEM and young talent.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think there's certainly there's a lot of ways more than when I was younger that you can basically go online from home and just essentially learn on your own. But I still feel that the great learning happens in the classroom environment still. So even though full access from home is the dream, we additionally need to focus on the possibilities of investments in local communities and schools. Once we provide the tools and support to local educators, we can go a long way to closing that gap for the digital divide. And that's basically one of Toyota's missions. We have, we have this fund. It's a Toyota USA Foundation. It's a charitable endowment. It's created to support education programs, and it serves pre-K all the way through 12th grade, and the teachers in the US. And the emphasis, again, is on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And essentially, we feel that that's one way. And by the way, it's a $110 million national fund, and it's being given out methodically to the areas that need it the most. But it's one way that we can create that spark consistently at various levels of education to make sure that the youth are really interested in using the technology and they're using it well. But it can also help us when we get the feedback from the teachers and say, hey, this worked or didn't work, or we need more money for this. It's a good loop that we've created to make sure that we keep that process fulfilling to not only the children who are actually getting the education, but also the teachers, as well as the corporations that in the future need to hire this great talent. So we don't have to go outside of the US, that we can do it actually in the US. So yeah, there's a lot there, but we're trying our best to attack it from many different angles.
But on that note, when we talk about literacy, there's also the issue about language access. Nicole, could you tell us a little bit about that problem?
Yes, and thank you so much. I really think it's super interesting to hear what Toyota is doing with these programs and making them really accessible to youth. So one of the problems that we see in with the digital literacy is cultivating the skill when 34% of the Asian American population is said to have limited English proficiency. Many of the programs that are currently designed to bridge the digital divide really fail to provide accessible translations to this community. In the rare cases where translations are available, many of them are not corrected for cultural context, which makes them difficult to decipher. For example, during the early days of the Affordable Connectivity Program, we were seeing translations that translated the word broadband internet into like wide belt, because it wasn't taking it as internet, but as literally broadband, which was becoming a problem for communities that really relied on these translations to get access to affordable internet. We also see that a fear and a lack of trust can discourage community members from reaching out and trying to find accessible language to be able to get online. We've heard from some of our elderly community partners that they were nervous of trying to get online because they were fearful of new technology, and the learning process was frustrating because it was largely conducted in English. Others said that when they wanted to get online, because of this burden of trying to find accessible programs, it felt like they didn't have time to be able to take the effort when they were worried about making sure their families had food and they were showing up to work and school on time. So these are all things that we take into consideration when talking about what the digital divide is looking like and how we bridge that digital literacy gap that exists within the communities.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm really curious to hear about some good practices, because we've also talked a little about the issues. So let's stick on the topic of digital literacy. Beth, would you be able to share some best practices or good practices that you've seen?
Sure. Thank you, Tomoko. It's really clear from all the research and what, that's been done in the area that holistic, localized, personalized efforts are needed to help people overcome digital literacy barriers. So as an example, AT&T's opened 25 connected learning centers across our service area as part of our $2 billion 3-year Bridge to Possibility commitment. And one of these is our Connected Learning Center in the Asian Pacific American Community Center in San Francisco, where AT&T helps to provide access and education tools to people who face connectivity barriers. We specifically chose the Asian Pacific American Community Center, or APAC for short, in Visitation Valley to house our San Francisco Connected Learning Center, because the APAC's mission is to help strengthen Asian Pacific American families in the local area by providing linguistically and culturally appropriate programs and services. Most of APAICS clients are low to moderate income immigrant families who have limited English proficiency. And so, as Nicole mentioned, for these reasons, these families are amongst the most vulnerable students and adults in California from a digital equity perspective. So in the APAC Connected Learning Center, AT&T furnishes free access to the internet over AT&T fiber, free Wi-Fi, and access to computers and monitors donated by Dell Computer, all of which are equipped with integrated audio and webcams to support virtual learning. The APAC Connected Learning Center also provides families with education resources, mentoring, and tutoring resources that help people to learn about the value of broadband and broadband-enabled technologies and how they can use them safely and effectively, including free digital literacy courses that AT&T has created in partnership with the Public Library Association and also the Achievery, which is a free digital learning platform created by AT&T. Finally, in the center, we also provide information regarding the federal Affordable Connectivity Program that Nicole talked about earlier, which helps eligible families to pay for broadband service. And we also provide, make available information regarding AT&T's low-cost broadband offers, which, when coupled with the Affordable Connectivity Program, enable eligible consumers to get high-speed broadband service for free.
Right. So you touched upon the other issue about device connectivity, which is also an affordability issue. So thank you for that example of providing us with an example of digital literacy, but very coupled with device connectivity. Nicole, did you have some further comments about digital literacy, a success story that we could also hear about?
Yes. So one of the things that Advancing Justice AAJC has been working on this year is partnering with some of our community partners to build out their digital literacy programming. And we've seen a lot of really great success with this. We've partnered with 5 different community organizations in Washington State, Texas, Michigan, and New York to pilot different kinds of digital literacy programs, some aimed at in-language Chinese elders in Seattle, others were aimed at more youth in Michigan, or aimed at specific workforce development programs in New York. Overwhelmingly, we saw that all of the communities that had the opportunity to participate in these programs were really excited and really demanded more classes. Almost immediately, the organizations came back to us and said our classes are full. They're asking for more classes. There was a big interest in learning how to use Excel at very in-depth levels from many of the different programs. So it's really exciting to see just like how profound these classes have been. And one of my favorite stories is one of the programs that was running in-language classes in Chinese for Chinese elders in Seattle. They had a graduation ceremony, and by the time they had graduated from their program, one of the students had already been hired based on the graphic design skills that he gained from the class that he took earlier that year. So we know that these programs are really important, and we know that people across the community really want to take part in digital literacy programming. They just need more opportunities to do so, and they need to be able to have options to participate in ones that are like culturally competent or even in language to meet them where they're at and get over that digital divide and that language access barrier.
So thank you. We've heard some great examples of how the adoption problem perhaps could be solved with some examples. But I guess perhaps some of these examples are also still concentrated in certain communities. And the question, of course, is how do we go out and scale these nationwide? How do we make it spread? And what possibly could be the mechanism, especially between government and the private sector, for being able to do this? Sharon, what's your perspective on that?
I think from a corporation point of view, at Toyota, thinking inward first without thinking about government support. I think government support can do a tremendous amount, but we as Toyota extract a tremendous amount of value from business partnering groups. And one of those business partnering groups we happen to have here is called TASIA. It's Toyota Asian American Association. Toyota Asian American Society in Alliance. And we have 600 members across the US and Canada. And we support a lot of things, but one of the key things that we do support is our AAPI Scholars. It's a scholarship that goes to underserved AAPI students. And over the past 9 years, we've been able to support over $700,000 in scholarships and have awarded it to over 185 students. We hold a really great reception. We get to meet the families. We get to meet the winners, and it's just an overall great event. But there's a lot of effort that goes into that, from evaluating the scholar applications, serving as mentors, and just helping build resumes and becoming resume coaches for some of these scholars. So that's one way that we're making the impact internally. Now, one of the things that happened out of COVID is that this work from home became a capability. And, typically we would hire interns and they'd have to be in the local area or they'd have to move here. But through COVID, we're actually hiring a lot of interns, and a lot of them do come from the Asian community, that essentially they're able to take the job remotely from wherever they're at. Of course, the connectivity is needed, and it's kind of their interview for us, but we're interviewing them, they're interviewing us, and eventually that does lead to full-time employment at Toyota. And at that point, it's funded, they're moved, and they're off to a career. So there's a few things like that I think that are happening within Toyota. And of course, any support from the government to build out that infrastructure or get those 3 A's sorted out is absolutely helps to feed, what we're trying to do inside of Toyota.
Yeah. And Beth, what are your perspectives on scaling these initiatives?
So recognizing that localized, personalized efforts are needed to overcome barriers to adoption, to scale them, it's frankly going to take funding and the collective efforts of the private sector, government at every level, and community-based organizations and educators. And this is also where government and the private sector can play important and complementary roles. I already talked about our connected learning centers, but beyond that, in the 2021 federal infrastructure legislation, Congress established a $2.75 billion digital equity grant program to promote digital equity and inclusion, to help increase internet adoption in communities across the country. The Digital Equity Act established 3 separate grant programs to support a variety of personalized, localized broadband adoption initiatives to enable each state to develop and implement their own digital equity plans, digital equity training, outreach and awareness campaigns, and device support. So in terms of best practices, states should use their funding to engage with organizations across all sectors, public, private, and expert nonprofit groups, develop a plan with multiple localized approaches to address adoption issues, including education, training, and access to devices, recognizing most importantly that there isn't a one-size-fits-all adoption solution. States should build on lessons learned from established successful broadband adoption programs, and most importantly, work with neighborhood organizations that know their communities best to target plans at the local level.
Yeah, thank you. Nicole, how about your perspective on this?
Yeah, and to add to Beth, one, especially about working with community organizations, once communities are connected to broadband, it's really important that they have access to translated resources. And so one of the ways that we think that people should be working together to build this up is by making the online live support systems more accessible to people who need in-language translators. Unfortunately, we see a lot of the support lines not be equipped to translate in language for a lot of Asian American communities, which can make it difficult for people to get support when they're trying to troubleshoot their broadband access or try to pay a bill online or sign up for broadband even. But earlier, I also wanted to add to what Beth was saying about the White House initiatives. Last year, the White House and several internet service providers announced that they would be offering low-cost programs to people who qualify for internet for the Affordable Connectivity Program. This was really important to making sure that communities across the US could get that broadband access for free. And I know Beth mentioned it earlier, but I just wanted to really highlight that as a really great example of the way that the industry and government has collaborated to really try to bridge this digital divide, because these low-cost programs have been really essential to making sure that people across the US can not only access affordable internet, but that they don't have to pay for it, and that they can fully worry about their other parts of their lives and not have to worry about whether or not they're going to have the money at the end of the month to pay a bill for broadband access.
So one of my last questions I have for all of you is, so what is the one thing you'd like the audience to take away from this conversation today about digital equity? Sharon, let's start with you.
Yeah, tremendous dialogue here today. By the way, I'd say, I know you said one, but I want to just quickly mention three small things, and I'll be fast. The speed of tech advancement and required literacy is not going to slow down anytime soon. If anything, it's accelerating faster than ever. To feed the talent pipeline and the needs of corporations, finally, to get talent in the future that they're going to need, the government and private sector, we need to start thinking top of funnel here and invest ASAP. That means investing for the younger kids as fast as possible. But also, even if we close the connectivity and digital platform gap, we have to still create that spark and interest in science and STEM at an early age. And, we need to follow that all the way through college graduation, all the way through employment. That's a journey that just never stops, and we need to nurture it the whole way. So those are just three quick thoughts and, takeaways. Thank you so much.
It's a very positive note that you gave us there, Sharon. Beth.
Yeah, the one takeaway that I think I would leave with the audience today is, like we talked about, in order to address kind of the whole universe of digital equity issues, it's really necessary to address each of the 3 A's we've talked about today: availability, affordability, and adoption. These are all different issues that have different causes. And so, they do need to be addressed separately, but at the same time, there needs to be a holistic strategy to address all of them. So that would be the one thing that I would urge the audience to think about. Thank you so much. This has been a great dialogue today.
And Nicole.
Yes, thank you. As they both said, I'm very excited to be here in this conversation with you all today. My main takeaway would be to really understand that the Asian American community across the US and across ages understand that internet access is no longer an option, but a vitalized utility that they need to have access to. And then it's really our job as trusted leaders, community organization, and industry service providers to make sure that they have access to the resources needed for affordable broadband internet, but that they also have access to opportunities for digital literacy skills so that we can bridge those 3 A's.
Thank you. So as we soon draw to a close on this very insightful session today, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their perspective and some wonderful insights and data, may I say. So as we wrap up today, it's very clear that the path to achieving digital equity is possible. It's riddled with challenges, and the journey might seem a bit daunting, but we've also heard quite a few positive news and a lot of interesting positive case studies today. And so with every challenge, every challenge presents an opportunity. And there's an opportunity to innovate, to collaborate, and to bridge that digital divide. So what we also take away here today is that digital equity isn't just about having access to technology. It's also about how we integrate and adopt that technology into our daily lives, how we empower every individual, and how we can also harness their potential. So as we move forward today, let's remember that it's not just about building the digital highway, but ensuring that every person has the skills to be able to navigate all of these new skills that they have access to. So thank you for joining us today, and let's continue this important conversation beyond today. And we're looking forward to continuing this discussion going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.